Talking with Connor O'Gara. He is columnist, editor, reporter, Saturday Down South. Connor, how you doing, man? Do you have a good weekend?
You know, I tried to as much as possible. It was nice to be able to watch a little bit of Chicago Cubs baseball. Nice seeing my Cubs take 2 out of 3. So I'm not going to complain, trying to stay positive, trying to just hope that I have baseball to look forward to this week as well.
Did you play baseball growing up?
I played through high school, though my brother was the baseball star of the family. My brother was the first baseman at Valparaiso, so he actually played at Arkansas back in the day when he was, he's a year older than me, so I think he played at Arkansas in like 2009 or something like that. So if you remember when Valpo came to Arkansas back in the day, that probably, the name O'Gara, I'm sure you remember that.
Well, tell him to get on his horn because I hear the Florida Marlins are looking for players. They might actually be entertaining signing people. So if he was unhappy the way his baseball career ended, he might be able to resume it right now.
No, I think he's making some calls. He's doing what he can. He actually does some writing for our Big Ten site. He's been doing columns there. Just got started off last week, but I think he'd be the first to admit that, if the Marlins called, he'd definitely be willing to listen. He's got to see what their testing protocols are and all that stuff. But, I don't think he's in any position to turn that down.
Michigan State and Rutgers had to shut down their teams for 2 weeks Friday. That's at the beginning of mandatory workouts. If that were to happen 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, during the regular season, as we're seeing happen right now in Major League Baseball, what do you think that does to the sport of college football?
I think we need to prepare for the likelihood that it does happen. NCAA said months ago that they expected that not all 130 FBS teams would be starting a season on time, and that there was going to be teams that were impacted by this that were going to have to shut down because let's also remember, you need to have 4 weeks of practice under your belt before you play a college football game. They haven't changed those rules yet. I think they've just changed those rules for other sports in terms of the preseason practice time, but you still need that time. So, it makes me question kind of the Labor Day start and all that. Obviously, I think if there's a time to do it, though, now seems like a good time to shut it down and to be a little bit overly cautious to try and isolate as much as possible so that you can get it figured out. And then, once the second week of August hits, you can be good to go and you can hopefully bank on your team being extremely healthy. And I'm not trying to say that this is some herd immunity thing or anything like that, but to try and be cautious about it now and to take this precaution seems like a smarter move than to wait until the middle of August. At least that's how I took it. But it's a reminder that this season is just going to be totally unpredictable, and we could have teams that are forfeiting games or having games canceled. We just need to prepare for the weird. That's what we need to be willing to embrace. It's inevitable. We're going to see positive cases, even if we flatten the curve and get this thing going in the right direction. But the Michigan State and Rutgers news is a reminder of, look, even if we do get cases like this, this year of college football is definitely going to feel weird, and we're going to have to kind of expect the unexpected.
I felt ambivalent about what Oklahoma did by moving their Week 1 game to Week 0. I love the thought that Joe Castiglione has about we got to leave ourselves some flexibility, some leeway to see what life is like on campus, to make room potentially for somebody testing positive and having to shut the team down. He says we give ourselves 5 weeks to play 3 games. With that said, I think it's a pipe dream anybody plays football Week 0, because I think by the end of the week we'll have some idea of a plan moving forward, and I'd be surprised if that plan moving forward for the 3 Power 5 leagues left that might play out of conference games, I'd be hugely surprised if they say we're good to go Week 0.
Yeah, I don't think that's in the cards either, and I'm hopeful that we have a season that can start in September. But, Week 0 seems very much like a pipe dream at this point, just based on the way that these dialogues have gone and based on what we're still trying to figure out with all of this. And if you do have teams that are, because I think there's going to be more teams that quarantine, and maybe even in the next week. And our national reaction is to be like, oh, this is just a sign that college football is shutting down. But I honestly think that they're doing that so that they can try and be as healthy as possible and try and control this thing, because everybody wants to have a season. Like, nobody's sitting here saying, hey, let's do whatever we can just to not have a season. Now, are there measures that are not being taken and maybe more things that we can be doing to make sure that we have a season? In my opinion, yes. But everybody that's acting right now, that's making decisions in college football, is doing so because they want to play football this year. And they're doing so and trying to do so in the safest way possible. And even Lincoln Riley has been someone who's been extremely vocal on the need for player safety during all this, despite the fact that Oklahoma is moving up this home game. Everybody wants flexibility, and everybody wants to be able to have this season. It's just going to be weird, and I don't know when we're ever going to feel like we kind of have the hang or the feel of how this season is going to look. Speaking to
Connor O'Gara here on Halftime, Connor, do you think we're going to hear a plan or maybe a decision from the SEC this week? Because for the past few weeks, all we've heard is by the end of July, the SEC is going to make its quote-unquote decision, but I think more or less what me and Phil agree, both releasing a plan for how they're going to attack this upcoming football season. At the end of July is this Friday, so do you think we're going to have some sort of decision by the end of the week?
Yeah, I do. I think that they're at the point now where they realize, look, we've got teams that are supposed to be doing mandatory workouts, and we're trying to get this thing figured out now, because you would hate to have players go through all of this stuff and then decide in the middle of August, look, we can't do this right now. I think they want to get out ahead of this. And while the policy has been to wait and to look at what the other pro sports are doing, I do think that they want to get this decided. They want to know what their year is going to look like instead of this constant pivoting, because sooner or later the decision is going to have to be made. And I if I'm guessing today, which that's all it is based on what we've seen, what we've read, what we've heard, is that it's going to be some sort of conference in one model. They're going to try and keep that non-conference game in place for the teams that have, the SEC, ACC rivalries, and maybe, so the neutral site openers like the Chick-fil-A kickoff game are going to be able to happen with limited capacity crowds, of course. But I think that they want to get this figured out. And I truly think that by the end of this week, we are really going to know. Now, I realize it seems like we've said that a lot during quarantine. We're going to know X by Y date. And it hasn't been the case. It hasn't been the case at all. So it wouldn't stun me if they delayed this decision even more to try and get some better momentum, maybe with the professional sports. They want to see how NFL training camp comes back and all that. But I feel like we are finally reaching the point where, it's going to be August very, very soon here. We're going to have this stuff at least somewhat figured out what the potential plan is by the end of this week.
We've talked about this before, kind of get into some analysis here just of a football season instead of talking about negative stuff all the time. We've talked about this before, the impact that Barry Odom could have on this defense for Arkansas. You had Arkansas ranked 11th in your most recent SEC defensive ranking. So with limited time on the field, now they're able to do walkthroughs with the teams right now. What kind of a realistic difference do you think Barry Odom can make with such limited time on a practice field?
I think it could still be significant. I think he can move them up something like at least to mediocrity, where you're in that 60 to 70 range in terms of scoring defenses. That's the first step that needs to happen with this rebuild. If you're sitting there with one of the 15 worst defenses in the country, I'm sorry. There's just nothing you're really going to be able to do to turn it around and start to see those wins, show up on a weekly basis. But I do think that he's still going to put guys in the right position to make plays. That's what I come back to more than anything else when I think about Barry Odom. He has had ample time to be able to watch film and understand the strengths and weaknesses of his team. Now, being on the same level physically as these SEC offenses is not going to be an easy thing, and that's a steep hill to have to climb. But I tend to think that for an Arkansas team that looked just so out of position repeatedly under John Chavis, that's going to be the biggest thing that we're going to notice, that even if they're not necessarily a sure tackling team, and they do kind of struggle with that early on, you're at least going to see them in spots where it's not looking like they're running. You're having guys run through these massive holes up front or something like that. I think that's going to be the most noticeable difference with Barry Odom, and the run defense is going to improve. It's inevitable. I truly believe that even with the personnel that they have returning, I think that you see Bumper Pool develop into a Nick Bolton type. I think he can have that type of impact in the Arkansas offense. For those who don't know who Nick Bolton is, the Mizzou linebacker who emerged as one of the nation's best at the end of last year, even after they lost their starting linebacker, Cale Garrett, to a season-ending injury. So I just think that what Barry Odom is going to bring is something that Arkansas has not had in recent memory, didn't even have during the Brett Bielema era, and I think this is going to be a noticeable turnaround if we do have a season.
Let me close out this with a thought about that I don't know if we've ever talked about before. We usually talk about, we're talking backups, right? Who's got the best backup quarterback? Who's got the best backup at this position? I don't think anybody's ever wondered who has the best backup head coach. Did you see where Toledo's head coach tested positive for the virus and has to quarantine? So I would imagine, he can't coach his team. You certainly can't during the game, virtually. I don't think it works that way. Maybe Arkansas's got a leg up and everybody else because of Barry Odom. I think that it's legitimate that even with all the precautions taken, there could be a head coach who during the season comes down with a virus. You need a good backup head coach. I'll put you on the spot. Who do you think has the best backup head coach in the SEC?
Barry Odom, Barry Odom might be the first choice, especially if you look at the way that he handled some difficult situations at Mizzou where, you remember what he was taking over with Gary Pinkel and the protests that they were dealing with at Mizzou. Very, very difficult time. I think we tend to forget about that era of Mizzou football after they, went to those SEC championships. And also the fact that, dude had to deal with the NCAA sanctions last year, which, it was bogus. It was absolute bogus. Mizzou got robbed. And that team rallied around him. Now, I don't think he made the right adjustments mid-season, but that defense was still really good last year. They have the number 16 defense in the country. People don't realize that. But I do think that Arkansas would be in great shape to have a guy like Barry Odom who's dealt with adversity before. Alabama would be another one. Having Steve Sarkisian would be very beneficial to have him take over a situation like that, not wishing ill will on anyone, but one would tend to think someone with Power 5 head coaching experience would be set up very, very well to be able to deal with all of that. And something that we obviously don't want to see happen. But, even maybe like a Todd Grantham at Florida, somebody who's been trying to maybe get back into the head coaching mix or something like that. I think that he would be really good leading a team. And, I think that there are very few in the SEC. Kevin Steele would be another one. You talk about the control that he has over the Auburn defense and how much players love and listen to that guy. I think he would command respect in that locker room. But it's crazy that we have to start thinking about stuff like this, but we kind of do, don't we?
Yeah, I just thought about this. It makes sense. If you're a human being, you can come down with this virus. That includes any college head coach. Hey, Connor, appreciate your time, man. It's always fun talking with you. Have a good week.
You're the man.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
You got it. Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. You interim head coaches, it's a different thing, right? That's somebody who takes over when someone's fired. I guess maybe in theory it'd be the same idea, but you would never think you go into a season worrying about who your backup head coach is. I think Arkansas would be in really good hands.
Absolutely. With
Barry Odom as a head coach, not in waiting, but a just-in-case head coach. Although you go from a head coach with an offensive mindset like Sam Pittman to a guy defensive mindset like Barry Odom. So in that case, I'm not sure if things change too much. Then Riles handles the offense just as usual. Odom still handles the defense. Anyway, just interesting thoughts.